Years of rule by the notorious Khmer Rouge in Cambodia had created large refugee camps on the Thai border as people fled their rule. In 1979, their brutal regime came to an end when the Vietnamese invaded the country.
I was working in a Cambodian refugee camp when the Khmer Rouge regime fell. And that obviously was very good news. I mean, we were all happy. I mean, we drank and sang in the camp because they were all victims of the Khmer Rouge.
Like many French aid workers, Brauman had come to humanitarianism from the French left after becoming disillusioned with communism.
People like me decided that instead of trying to accomplish justice in the future, we try to bring a bit of justice here and now.
It was hoped that the new Cambodian government would lead to an immediate improvement in people's lives. But within a few months, thousands of new refugees began to appear on the Thai border.
We discovered a horrific landscape. I mean, thousands of people just crossing the border and well, falling on the ground just to die. They used their last drop of energy to walk across the border and then fell on the ground, crying, groaning, coughing, throwing up. That was a nightmarish spectacle. And for me, probably because of my family history, it was just, well, this is Auschwitz. We all thought that this was just the tip of the iceberg, and that the rest of the country was in a still worse state. And that is the beginning of the big mistake.
Pen Sovann, defense minister, is the strong man in the government, but only by grace of the Vietnamese and their sponsors, the Russians.
This was a famine mired in Cold War calculations. The new Cambodian regime was seen by the West as puppets of the Vietnamese, who in turn were puppets of the Soviets.
You had a need for aid to go in, and yet a government not recognized, so the UN couldn't launch an appeal. USAID wouldn't put any money in, the big donors wouldn't. And what actually happened was a relatively small agency then, Oxfam in Great Britain, essentially said that this is just immoral. You can't just stand by and do nothing.
The British public give over £100 million a year to 78,000 different charities, and a large slice, about 3 million, goes to Oxfam. Curious when you consider our reputation for insularity.
Watching events from Oxford was Oxfam program manager Marcus Thompson.
My concern with young people is that the image that is conjured up when someone mentions the word Oxfam doesn't switch them off. They think, you know, starving babies. Because certainly we're about starving babies, but we're about a mass of other things too.
If the new generation of French aid worker was drawn from the ranks of the disaffected left, in Britain, it was another sort of faith that drew the young to humanitarianism.
I work for Oxfam, and Oxfam is a non-confessional, non-religious organization, although it was founded by people who, particularly Quakers, from a very liberal Christian tradition. So my conviction was to, as a Christian, to do something that's useful for other people, in a sense, as a life of witness, but without ramming it down people's throats.
Marcus Thompson formed part of an Oxfam delegation that went to Cambodia to set up an independent aid program against the wishes of Western governments. He found a country in ruins.
It was rather surreal. In 79, there was no currency. Currency was either State Express 555 cigarettes or rice. Currency was blowing in the streets, and kids were collecting it up in order to light a fire under the kettle to boil the tea. Somebody, we assume the Khmer Rouge, having cleared the city, had gone through the apartments and chucked everything out the window into the street. So the streets were heaped with rubbish. I mean, Cambodia was on its knees, more than on its knees. I mean, it was on its stomach, if you like.
With no other agency providing relief, Oxfam stepped in.
Our director, it became his special baby, and he wanted to push it, which was partly sort of because he wanted to do a good job and partly because he wanted to put Oxfam in the limelight. So it became a big thing for Oxfam.
Oxfam now launched its campaign to save the starving of Cambodia.
Oh, I think there are thousands of people dying daily now, and I think that we will grow. I think we will lose 1 million people by Christmas.
Journalists reported similar fears from inside the country.
They are dying because they have virtually nothing of value to eat. No fresh water, no vitamins, no milk. Starving. How much time have we got to save those 2 million people?
This has been requested for the next 6 months.
So we've got 6 months.
The response of the British people to the appeal was the largest since Biafra.
The Great Blue Peter Bring and Buy sale starts tomorrow.
Are you all going to come and buy your Christmas presents from here?
What's still needed most is food, and that's where I think your appeal is going to literally save many lives.
With the Christmas shopping boom in London's West End now at its peak, many cab drivers turned out happy to work for nothing, donating all their takings for the starving people of Cambodia.
After I'd got there, in a sense, the world went bananas about the horrors of Cambodia, which I was unaware of there in Cambodia. And we had an interesting exchange where I had reckoned I could spend about £100,000 over a year in the program, and I got telexes to the post office saying, actually, you can spend £1 million, and then a few days later, actually, you can spend £5 million. And I was telexing back, you know, I'm trying to do a serious job. Sort of funny stories like that are not very helpful. And they're saying, no, the world has gone bananas.
Also with the Oxfam team was nutritionist Tim Lusty. As head of Oxfam's health unit, he was uniquely qualified to assess the nature of the famine and calculate how much food aid would be required.
Our mission was to make an assessment and to start implementing, or sort of taking stuff in. So my job was particularly to look at the medical and feeding side.
Lusty travelled around Phnom Penh, measuring the circumference of children's arms, the standard method then used to assess malnutrition. After all the reports of starvation, his findings were unexpected.
Let me make it absolutely straight from now, there was not a famine inside. I know, I was the first nutritionist to go in and do an assessment, and there just wasn't a famine there. And it caused me a certain amount of anxiety at the time because it had already been put out, 4 million were going to die before Christmas if we didn't get so many tons of food in.
We're absolutely overwhelmed here at Blue Peter. We've now got £500,000. That's £500,000, which is quite incredible.
I'm not a very emotional person at certain points and times, and when I'm doing a job, I like to be accurate. And I travelled around more than anybody else had travelled around, and I used my arm circumference, a little bit of tape measure to measure. And there was an orphanage where they said the children were in a terrible state. Well, it was dirty and filthy and all sorts of things, but there wasn't a single child that was severely malnourished in the whole place.
The exact figure that we have reached so far is £653,166, which is pretty staggering news.
And it's all due to you.
And then I travelled around with our director, and I said, I'll travel around. You point any child to me that we see in the streets or anywhere that you think is starving, and I'll do an arm circumference on him and tell you whether he is. And of course we didn't find any at all.
And it's now flashing at the 2 million mark. In fact, the exact figure is £2 million, £6,000 and £41.
Lusty wrote a report detailing what he had found.
You wrote this in your report, and how was it received?
Well, they ignored my report because, yeah, I mean, I don't want to knock Oxfam because it's one of the most brilliant organisations, and I owe them a huge amount for my life, bits of my life. But on this particular occasion, they got it wrong. You know, I was isolated, and it was really hard on me because they'd arranged for me to do a series of talks around the whole of the UK. And I said, the Home Division, I said, look, I'm very happy to do that. But one thing I'm not going to say is 4 million people are going to die before Christmas because I believe this is wrong. And they cancelled the entire, I wasn't asked, I wasn't actually, I was not encouraged to talk to the press or anything.
There was no famine in Cambodia. There was, all the conditions to create a massive famine were there. But Cambodia is there is such a generous nature, generous environment. And the Cambodian people seem to know so well how to find food from their environment that, well, they survived. There was no real starvation. And the terrible condition we saw amongst the people who'd crossed the border was due to the fact that they'd been walking for months and months in the rainforest, in very harsh environment. So they'd fallen sick, but they did not represent the country. They were not the tip of the iceberg, as we thought. They were just an exception.
The campaign was already in train, saying that millions would die by Christmas. So to get a report saying people will get by, and in a sense that was then buried, that report.
It was a horrific situation. I'm not sure where the, N million people will die by Christmas came from. It certainly galvanized people, or helped to galvanize people here.
At the heart of it, though, isn't it wrong to say that X million will die by Christmas when Oxfam knew that they wouldn't?
Yes, it's wrong to say that if we know that they wouldn't. Yes, maybe we were wrong in that situation to do that, but there certainly were urgent needs, and there certainly were people dying. Whether it was that many, it's difficult to know.
The making of false claims is a huge part of humanitarianism. People are always going to starve in humanitarian predictions. It's always going to be terrible famine, impossible famine, and often these predictions are quite wild.
The big problem with the aid system is that it does fall back into kind of institutional interest, that everybody in it starts thinking about their own interests. So we get a kind of distortion of what is actually told in public, because the institutions turn what they're hearing on the ground into something that will encourage more aid. So the message is always, yes, but if you give a little bit more, then we'll solve that problem. It just needs more money, more money, more money is the message endlessly coming out.